Well, it's good to be together. Go ahead and turn your Bible to Nahum 3. We'll finish out the book of Nahum tonight. Next week, Carrie will start the book of Habakkuk for us. What my goal is tonight, I'm hoping that as we close this book out, I'm hoping it will strike you the importance of seeing and studying these Old Testament prophets. And I hope I can make it clear enough from what he says that you need to have a concern. I wish there would be more of our people here that would want to go through these books. You get opportunities to go through books of the Bible and better equip yourself and better familiarize yourself with the way God operates and what God's doing. But I'm so grateful you're here for that. Well, Nahum chapter 3, we're going to have the charges laid out against Nineveh and the Assyrian nation. God's set up a seat of judgment. And he's about to tell them, this is the reason for your destruction impending. And it's no different when you get over to the book of Matthew. Matthew chapter 23, Matthew 24 is the destruction of Jerusalem. But when you back up into Matthew 23, you know what Jesus does? He lays out the charges why Jerusalem's coming down. So this is no different than what he did over there. And the beauty of it all is that you see this unchanging God. He's the same as he's always been. Well, I want you to look right quick just at the very first part of chapter 2 in verse 13. And look at where he starts this. He says, "Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts." How would you like to hear that from God? I mean, what would that do to you? I am against you. Behold, you better pay attention. Because people don't seem to pay attention, especially even more so today. Well, I'm against you. Here's the first charge. Look at verse 1 of chapter 3. Woe to the bloody city, completely full of lies and pillage. What charges does God just charge Nineveh with? Full of lies. He calls them a bloody city. Why would he say that? They kill. They kill other nations and just overtake them. We've seen that through the book of Nahum, and as we've gone back and we've looked at different aspects of them and how they would go and they would just run over nations, didn't have any pity. And so, here's your charges. You're a bloody city. You are completely full of lies and pillage. It's almost like they're waiting for their next attack on people. And so just like an animal stalking its prey, that's what they're like. Look at verse 2. The noise of the whip, the noise of the rattling of the wheel, galloping horses, and bounding chariots, horsemen charging, swords flashing, spears gleaming, many slain, a mass of corpses, and countless dead bodies. They stumble over the dead bodies. What's the scene? A what?
Horrible chaos.
Chaos, absolutely. That's a lot of chaos. I mean, when you look at how the calamity of all these horses and all of these chariots and all of these soldiers that are marching through, and they've got their swords and their spears, they're gleaming. And what's happened?
They've killed so many that they pile up and they run over them.
Yeah. There's so many slain, and they just trip over the bodies in their continued process. Now, how bad do you think it's going to be? You see, when Assyria attacked and devastated Israel, they took over 200,000 Israelites captive, and they took them back to Nineveh, or Assyria itself. What do you think the kind of noise that Israel heard when they attacked? Well, guess what's about to come to Nineveh? I am against you. And now it's going to happen the same thing in Assyria, Nineveh in particular. Look at verse 4. All because of the many harlotries of the harlot, the charming one, the mistress of sorceries, who sells nations by her harlotries and families by her sorceries. What does God call them through Nahum? A harlot. You're a prostitute. You've prostituted yourself with other nations. And, oh, by the way, how else have they gone about this? Yeah. She's charming. Oh, what they look like. They're just selling wares. They're just taking people in. And she's a mistress of what? Sorceries. I mean, it's not getting better for them. I mean, as God lays out these charges, does this sound good? Would you like to hear this from a prophet of God standing here and saying, hey, you are the instigator of all evil right now in the world, and God says, I'm against you. He declares it. And so here she is doing all of these things in this harlotry. You know, I was thinking as I was reading through this today again, it struck me that, you know, when Japan struck Pearl Harbor, who was in Washington, D.C.? The Japanese diplomats. We're your friend, we're your pal, oh, so charming. And guess what's happening at those times they're speaking? Well, do what?
They came in with the sun.
Yes. Yeah, they came in with the sun. But the point being, they were charming.
Yeah.
And no awareness. And this is what Nineveh is. This is what Assyria is, the same thing. And again, I want you to see that God's ways never change. I want you to hold this for just a second. Come over to Revelation chapter 17. I know we're studying Revelation Sunday mornings, but and we'll get to 17 one day, I hope. But I want you to see Revelation 17. From 700 BC, back here at Nahum, all the way to the first century, God always remains true. You can count on Him. In Revelation chapter 17, I want you to look at verse 18 first. He writes, the woman who you saw, we'll see her in just a second. The woman who you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth. Who would that be? at the writing of the book of Revelation? It's Rome. Reigns is present tense. So we know at the present tense writing in the book of Revelation, he pictures this woman, but she reigns over the nations. It's only one that reigned back there. It was Rome. Well, now that we speak of her, look back at verse 3 of chapter 17. He says, and he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So here's this woman sitting mighty pretty. The woman is clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations of the unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And that woman is who? Rome. And what does he call her? She's a harlot. She is the mother of harlots. And as you keep reading through the rest of the book of Revelation, as he begins describing her judgment and her effect on the other nations, she charmed them and deceived them. Listen, things don't change. And I wanted you to come over and I wanted you to see this because back here in Nahum 3, guess what he calls Nineveh? She is a harlot. She's charming. She's full of lies. She's immoral. And so you see, God doesn't change. And he deals in Revelation with Rome the same way back here in Nahum. He's about to deal with Assyria. I want you to see, God doesn't change. You see why we need to read this book? You need to see the connection. That just because these are Old Testament prophets does not mean that they're worthless for us. These are great value that you can understand all the way through. God's the same. He never changes with anything. And so now we get to see, if you come back to Nahum 3, now you get to see that here's how God's going to deal with nations. Here's how God deals with people. Don't care who they are. And so Rome and Nineveh doing the same thing, and God's going to do the same thing to both of them. Continue on. Look at verse 6. All because of the many harlotries of the harlot, the charming one, the mistress of sorceries who sells nations by her harlotries and families by her sorceries. Verse 5. Behold, I am against you. Have you heard that before? I mean, what is God trying to get to point to Assyria? I'm against you. I am against you. Verse 5. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. And I will lift up your skirts over your face and allow the nations, and to show the nations your nakedness and to the kingdoms your disgrace. I will throw filth on you and make you vile and set you up as a spectacle. What's the picture? Making them not look very pretty. And you ladies here, you think about, what would it do to you if someone just lifted up your skirt over your head? What kind of disgrace would that be for you? You know what God says I'm going to do to Assyria, Nineveh? I'm lifting up your skirt. I'm going to show the nations your nakedness. And in that process, what else is God going to do? I'm going to throw filth on you and make you vile and set you up as a spectacle. What are you seeing? I mean, this is pretty vivid. Complete humiliation.
Great for so long, now they're going to look really bad.
That's a good point. Grace said they've been great for so long, looking good for so long, the power so long, and now guess what you're going to be? You're going to be disgraced. And if you remember back in chapter 2, if you remember, he tells them, I want you to be at full strength. I want you to be at full strength. He's going to remind them again here in chapter 3 of that very same thing again. Because God does it not when nations are weak. It's when they're at their strength. And so now it's not going to be a good thing. You know, I am against you. Let's make a quick side note here. We know places like Romans 8:31, where Paul asked the question, what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, then who's against you? Let's flip it. If God is against you, who's for you? We can see the reverse. And so now that we get to see that, we think about it, man, how many of us would want God to be against us? And He can. He can. Just because we say we love the Lord, that doesn't make it a reality. We can be practicing evil things and doing evil things. Well, God's aware. He hasn't changed. And He does the same thing. And so here you are, you're going to be made a disgrace, ugly, filthy, when I get done with you. Well, look at verse 7. Let's keep going. And it will come about that all who see you will shrink from you and say, Nineveh is devastated. Who will grieve for her? Where will I seek your comforters? All the nations, all these others who see her, what's going to be their reaction whenever she has her skirt lifted up and filth and vile thrown at her? Are they shocked? Nineveh's devastated. This is the capital of the world where they rule all the world from. And everyone else is sitting there, they're going to see you, they're going to shrink away from you. You know, this is no different. A while ago when we were reading in Revelation 17, when you get into Revelation 18, and when God has brought down Rome, you know what all the other nations do? They are shocked. What's happened to our merchant? What's happened to our buyer and seller of our goods? In one day, it went down. That's what happened. Well, is that what he's saying here? Yeah. You know, he says here at the end of verse 7, they ask the question, who will grieve for her? Where will I seek your comforters? Tell me what he's saying. Who's going to care? Who's going to attend your funeral? That's the question. Who's going to attend your funeral? Well, you think anyone's going to shed tears for as corrupt and evil and vile as a blood city? You think people are going to be shedding tears? Many years back, there was a fellow, and if I throw out his name, there's several of them even more modern, and I don't want to get them all mixed up. So I'm just going to tell you, there was a fellow in a town, and he bombarded the people of that town. And he took their things, and he killed different ones if they didn't agree with him. He was nothing but a big bully, and the town was afraid of him. One day, someone shot him, killed him. No one spoke to the authorities. When the authorities came in, they wanted to find out who murdered this guy. No one said a word. They had a funeral. You know how many attended? None. You know who they had to get to do the funeral? A man from another town. Because no one, this is what it looks like whenever things are destroyed and nobody's getting away with anything. God's aware, He knows, and so there's not going to be anybody shedding tears, and there's sure not going to be anybody at your funeral. Well, what think's going to happen next? Verse 8. He's just laying this out. I'm against you. It's happening. Verse 8. He says, are you better than Nahum, which was situated by the waters of the Nile, with water surrounding her, whose rampart was the sea, whose wall consisted of the sea? He brings into this little place or this city called Nahum. Now, Nahum is in Egypt. And Assyria had attacked Nahum. And what did Nahum depend on for their safety according to verse 8? They had the river, Nile. They had the sea. Carrie brought us last week, was talking there in chapter 2, how Nineveh fell. And Nineveh thought the same thing. They thought with all this water surrounding them and the river, nobody can touch us. And so now he brings up, you're no better than Nahum down in Egypt. They called it, Nahum was also called Thebes, if you want to know. And so, remember that? How would you like that to be brought up to you? It's about, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, forgive me if I miss it a little bit, but it's about 38 years earlier they destroyed Nahum. So, what do you think Nineveh's thinking, the Ninevites, the Assyrians?
This can't happen to us.
Yeah. You remember Nahum? You remember how they thought that no one could ever touch them? Oh, yes. You know, we're in trouble. There's your memory right there. And by the way, are you the king of the earth, the power of the earth? Are you better than they? Well, what does it remind you of America today? God hadn't changed. That's why you don't have to get all disturbed when you watch all this news stuff of what's happening. God's got this thing. He's had it all the way through. Well, look at verse 9. Ethiopia was her might, and Egypt too, without limits. Put and Lubim were among her helpers. What about Nahum and Egypt? What does he tell us in verse 9 about them? I mean, they got the sea, they got the river, you know, nobody can touch us, and then what? They had allies. And those allies consisted of who? Egypt, and then Put and Lubim, Yeah, these were their allies. So not only were they protected by the sea and the river, but they had allies that would come to their aid of anything needed. Well, Assyria in 671 overthrew Egypt, except one part, Nahum up at the very top. In 663, they finally made it through and they took down Nahum. You see, you destroy Egypt, what have you destroyed? Their ally, and Put and Luban was there too. They took them. So where do you find yourself? You got nothing. There's no help coming. And so here's Nahum telling them, you remember? Yeah, you remember Nahum? You remember what you did to them? You remember how you took them down? You remember they even had allies to come to their aid? And they couldn't get there. They didn't help. So, I'm against you. Where are we at? Whew, it's not good. Look at verse 10. Yet she became an exile. She went into captivity. Also, her small children were dashed to pieces at the head of every street. They cast lots for her honorable men, and all of her great men were bound with fetters. This is Nahum. I want you to remember what happened in Nahum. And what charges does he lay out here? I mean, what did you do to the small children? Cut them up. Cut them in the streets. Yeah. What did they do to the honorable men? They exiled. They put them in fetters. So all the men of honor were disgraced. And they were led away with fetters back to Assyria. You dishonored them. So here's Nahum from God. Remember that. Here's the charges against you, Nineveh, for your cruelty and for your humiliation and for your city of blood that killed all these people. Whew. Pretty strong words, isn't it? I sure think it is. So, verse 11. You too will become drunk. You will be hidden. You too will search for a refuge from the enemy. Now, what does he describe them? Why would he say you too will become drunk? Drunk with power? Well, whenever you're secure, what do most people do? They party. Ain't nothing going to happen to us. Yeah, you're going to become drunk. I had a thought, and I can't remember it. Well, all the fortifications, verse 12 or verse 11. You too will become drunk. You will be hidden. You will search for a refuge from the enemy. Are they going to want to hide? And guess what they're not going to find? Yeah, you feel secure. Verse 12. All your fortifications are fig trees with ripe fruit. When shaken, they fall into the mouth of the eaters. Now what does he picture them as? Ripe figs. You know when figs ripen on trees, you know what you do? You know how they get them off? They shake the tree because they just fall. And so he's got this picture, the figs, they fall into the mouth of the eaters. Just so when they're ripe. Oh, what about Assyria? Let me just give you a side note here. He's using this exaggerated language, exactly like the book of Revelation uses, to try to make a point. And what's the point? They're going to be easy for the take. You know, we call it easy for the picking. Yeah. Here they are. I'm against you. And it ain't going to be pretty. And even though you're going to be drinking, thinking, everything's fine, we're all secure. But now, you're ripe for the picking. And you're just going to fall. Verse 13. Behold, your people are women in your midst. The gates of your land are opened wide to your enemies. Fire consumed your gate bars. Now what's his point?
Not secured anymore.
Yeah, go ahead.
When God decides that He's had enough, there are no fortifications that you can hide behind.
That's a great point. When God decides He's had enough, there are no fortifications that'll save you. And when He pictures this, your people are women in your midst. Where's the men? So your men, who should be the army and the protectors of everything, they're a bunch of women. That's all you've got to muster against me. There is nothing else. They're like women. There's no bars on your gates. Actually, there's no gates because they didn't burn with fire. He's using this to describe this is how easy it's going to be to destroy the greatest city at that time on the earth that ruled all of mankind. Now, if you're hearing this and you're part of the Assyrians, what do you think you'd be thinking right about now? That hadn't happened yet.
They're nervous, I'm sure.
Yeah, it ain't going to happen. We're Nineveh the Great. We're Assyria, the greatest nation to ever exist. We're not even going to pay attention, which is another reason you're going to come down. Look at verse 14. Look at what God calls them to do. Draw for yourselves water for the siege. Got to put out a fire. Strengthen your fortifications. Oh, you think your bars need to be strengthened? Your gates need to be? Go into the clay and tread the mortar. Take hold of the brick mold. What's he asking Nineveh to do? What's he asking the Syrians to do? You muster all the strength you can find. Make it the strongest that has ever existed if you want to do it on the earth. You know, do everything that's available to man. And then what?
And then watch me destroy it.
And then what? It's destroyed. No matter how much strength. And you know, one of the things I hear often, and I'm sure you do too, how many people say or teach that we as people can do anything we set our mind to? You take that idea, and what is God telling Nineveh to do? Set your mind to doing what? Strengthen it, make it as strong. Set your mind to do anything you want. You can accomplish it. Okay, I want you at full strength. Verse 15. Their fire will consume you. The sword will cut you down. It will consume you as the locust does. Multiply yourselves like the creeping locust. Multiply yourselves like the swarming locust. Now what's he calling them to do? Build up all your forces as much as you want. Just like the locusts. What do locusts do to areas when they attack?
They destroy.
They destroyed all. Everything that's green is gone. You know, so you go ahead and multiply yourself, Assyria, just like the locusts. Why don't you go ahead and call as many as you can? But I'm against you. I want you at full strength. Keep increasing your numbers. Keep fortifying your cities. Keep fortifying Nineveh. Yeah, I want you to do it. Verse 16. You have increased your traders more than the stars of heaven. The creeping locust strips and flies away. What else have they done?
Notice once they come in, like you see, they just strip all vegetation and then they're gone.
That's what the locusts do. But what has Nineveh done? Yeah, they took their traders, they increased their traders. So what kind of city do we have here? If you increase the trade, you got a lot of money. You got a lot of wealth coming in. And surely with money and wealth and all these things, nobody's going to be able to do anything there until the locusts hit. And they're going to strip you clean. Whew. That's what's going to happen to Nineveh, verse 17. Your guardsmen are like the swarming locusts. Your marshals are like hordes of grasshoppers settling in the stone walls on a cold day. The sun rises, and they flee. And the place where they are is not known. So their guardsmen, their marshals, what does he compare them to? Yeah, locusts, grasshoppers, that's their military. Yeah, you know what they do when it's cool? Locusts and grasshoppers gets back into cracks and crevices to be protected from the cool. But then when the heat comes on, it gets hot, what do? Yeah, they escape, they take off. Well, guess what your guardsmen and your marshals are going to be like? And they're not going to be found. They are fleeing for their lives. Your protectors will vanish. 18. Your shepherds are sleeping, O king of Assyria. Your nobles are lying down. Your people are scattered on the mountain, and there is no one to gather them. Now, what's the picture? Yeah, you know, when we were talking a while ago, made the comment about, you're hearing this ahead of time, and you're thinking, oh, we're Nineveh the great. Man can do anything. We're great. Anything we set our mind to, we can do great things. You're not heeding. So guess what? Your shepherds, your people, your nobles, they're all sleeping. Not even going to be aware of what happens. And so we are at a point as we end up the book. Is there a remedy? No. And a great lesson we need to learn. A nation or people, they can get to a point that there is no remedy to help them. Nineveh had an opportunity at the preaching of Jonah. There's no cure for this. I'm against you. Here's all the charges against you. And this is what's going to happen. Verse 19. There is no relief for your breakdown. Your wound is incurable. All who hear about you will clap their hands over you, for on whom has not your evil passed continually? Is it incurable? Bottom line, who controls the nations? God controls the nations of the world. He always has, and He always will, even if they're the mightiest nations on earth. God's going to have the say-so. And we can look back in our history, and we can see all these nations at times that had risen up, and all of a sudden they're just gone. What do we need to learn from that? There's no nation, she said, strong enough, big enough, that God can overpower. Yes?
Humble yourself before the Lord.
That's a good point. Humble yourself before God. We're not a mighty people. We're people created of dust, the lowliest of material. And here they come. Nahum has laid it all, the charges out. In 612 BC, Babylon attacks Assyria. And the devastation, and this is from history, the devastation is so great, they cannot find some of the ruins of the cities nor of Nineveh. Babylon completely decimated them, and it's not even recognizable in the ruins today. So what does that teach us? I think we need to heed the Lord, don't you? I think we need to pay attention. That when the Lord speaks, when the Lord teaches, when the Lord says something, that needs to be heeded. Doesn't it? Any comments till we end? Yes, sir.
You know, Nahum tells them in chapter 1, verse 7, the only thing that you can do, the Lord is good. The stronghold in the day of trouble, and He knows those who take refuge in Him. That's your only refuge.
That's a great point Ron makes. Nahum 1:7 is that the Lord is a stronghold. He's a refuge in the day of trouble. That's your only way out. And to encourage us, if something were to happen in this nation, what are you going to do? You got to turn to God. I mean, let's muster up everything we can. Let's get everything. We've got to be prepared for this coming. It's going to get strength. God is our only refuge in this deal. God is the only way out. I hope you learned something out of Nahum. Great book. I love it. Great book. And Habakkuk next week. Thank you.
I will love.